Good morning. All right, like that. All right. Well, I have brought copies upon copies of my notes so that we don't do again what happened last week. But either way, I'm excited to be here. I want to just jump right back into this series and to say today and to the next week are going to be, my prayer is very convicting messages for us as a church and as individuals. If you recall, we've been going through this series on the Great Commission, this call for us to go and do the work that God has called us to do. The reason why we're here on this earth is to fulfill His purposes for us and to make sure that we bring His family back to Him. And the first week we talked about just how, maybe in our world we've lost a little sense of that adventure that comes from the idea of going, and we've become comfortable and we enjoy staying a little too much. And the idea that going, actually, if you remember, is exciting. It's where we enjoy life when we're exploring and we're on the go. And then the second week we kind of talked about just the lies that we believe about going when it's in the context of the Great Commission, the lies that we believe that keep us from doing it in the name of Christ. And then last week we kind of talked about, we began the idea of the concentric circles of our mission field, this idea that, in Acts 1:8 it said that you will receive power when the Holy Spirit comes upon you, and you will be my witnesses in Jerusalem, in all Judea and Samaria, and to the end of the earth. And in that context, we've been kind of looking at what is Jerusalem to us, what is Judea, what is Samaria, what is the end of the earth. And truth be told, is Jerusalem for us is our very first mission field, which is our own church, our own families, the things that are closest to us, the next generation, and how that is our very first and probably most important priority when it comes to fulfilling the Great Commission. And so that was all last week. This week, I want to talk about the very next ring that comes right outside of that, and that is our Judea. And just as a member of the principle, you need to be faithful to the rings that are closest to you to be faithful to the ring next to it. Last week I kind of talked about the idea that if you cannot even lead or serve or reach your family, how are you going to be able to lead and serve and reach those outside of your family? There's this idea that we've got to be responsible for the things that are closest to us, and then we take the next level of responsibility and you keep going out. And hopefully you reach the end of the earth and all the rings in between are all good and healthy. So today we're going to talk about what Judea is. And like I said, a little artistic license. I'm going to interpret Judea as our city, our neighbors, Huntington Beach, per se. Now, I'll be the first one to tell you that when we got this message from a church called Beach Bible Church in Huntington Beach saying that if we would be interested in possibly taking a look to see if this might be where God would lead us, we had a perception of Southern California in our minds. It was going to be all Ken doll, Barbie doll. I thought everyone was going to have a pink convertible, either Corvette or VW Bug, one or the other. There's this idea that we had, and the world has, of Southern California. And then I can't tell you how pleased we were when we got here that we saw real people, people who were laid back, who enjoyed the just simple things of life. But then the longer we've been here, I realized we even lucked out more than we thought we did, because Huntington Beach in particular is really a great place for my family and myself. We love the vibe, but yet just a few towns over, it's a very different vibe, and a few towns over is a very different vibe. And I was telling someone the other day that if we had been called to a church in, let's say, Riverside or something like that, and we would have thought, oh, Southern California, right next to the beach, kind of thing. We had this idea that all Southern California was on the beach, and now we realize, wow, there's tons of it that's in incredibly hot desert land. And so we're so grateful for where we landed and the people around us. And so the question is, well, then how do we reach this place? How do we reach a city like Huntington Beach? How do we share the message of Christ with them? How do we fulfill the Great Commission to our own neighbors? And one of the difficulties of this ring, this Judea, is that you will see these people again. You can't just drop a bomb and leave. You know, I remember once someone gave an illustration, and I loved it. And a lot of times people operate in this idea of, like, they call the gospel grenade. Okay? It's like the idea of saying, you know, Jesus loves you, tossing it and run. You know? And that's how we sometimes seek to communicate the gospel. We kind of yell it at someone and then hope they don't engage us, and we go the other way. We hand them something and we walk away because we don't want them to, we're a little nervous about it or whatever it might be. And it's called the gospel grenade because you just gave them something and you hope you don't ever have to see them again. But yet, this area, this Judea that we're going to be looking at, these are the people that when you drive through your neighborhood, you see in their front yard watering their grass and you give them a wave. These are the people that you, when you go shopping at the grocery store, you know, sometimes you're like, you know, your face looks familiar, and you realize, oh, we just shop at the same time, kind of in the same days of the week, and we just become familiar. These are people that you see time and time again. And so, whatever you do, you realize that you have to do it in a way that you're not embarrassed to see them again, that you're not afraid to see them again. And so how do you do that? How do you reach people who you are living life with? Maybe coworkers, neighbors, friends, classmates, things like that. How do you share with people that tomorrow you're going to bump into again? Now, most times when people think about like local outreach, I would say almost, I'd be curious. I won't make a show of hands to do this, but I'd be curious to know what comes to your mind when I say, hey, we're gonna reach our neighbors. We're gonna do some local outreach. How many people, their minds go to some sort of evangelistic program? You know what I'm talking about, right? Like 4 Spiritual Laws, Evangelism Explosion, 2 Ways to Live, the idea of the way of the master. I mean, these are just ones that I kind of think of. But this idea is that, you know, we as a church kind of do some training, and then we decide there's going to be a Saturday where we go and we're going to blanket our neighborhoods and we're going to go out there and reach our neighbors. You know, oftentimes that's where people's minds go right away, to this idea of local outreach. Now, I'm going to tread some careful ground because I know some people love some of these programs. So let me state the good about a lot of these programs. One is they really do equip you to understand and clearly communicate the gospel. I very much am appreciative of that. They give you a sense of you kind of an idea of, you know, how to walk someone step by step through through an understanding of the gospel. So in that sense, it's a great kind of tool ourselves to learn those essentials, and they're oftentimes a great little kind of jumpstart or a boost to someone who's done nothing to now kind of saying, okay, all right, I can do this, kind of getting them ready to actually do it. But there's a bad side to those kind of methods as well, and it's the very thing that I talked about. It's a program. It's a formulaic method. It ends up being something that, unfortunately, once it's done a couple times, people see it coming. The same response that people have towards Jehovah's Witness or Mormon missionaries or something like that, they have towards people who would be Christians who would be doing the same thing. There's this idea that people can see immediately that this is I'm walking into some sort of trap or kind of some sort of spiel where they're trying to avoid the kind of the getting even engaged in it. I mean, it happens even when I have people coming to tell me about how I need to upgrade my cable or how I need, hey, we're putting grass in down the street. We'd like to know if you want to do the grass. You know what I mean? They come and you're trying to like, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you, no, thank you. You know what I mean? You keep trying to tell them to go away, but they keep coming. Oh, what about this? And what about that? Have you thought about that? You know what I'm saying? There's people have a natural disdain towards anyone they feel is trying to sell them something. And sometimes these formulas can come across as us trying to sell something to somebody. And the other side of it, and I would say that this is more on our part that I am concerned about, like programmatic-based local outreach, is that it tells us the false sense that this is something you do a couple times a year with your church. We're gonna just, hey, have you shared your faith this year? Are you someone who is a ambassador for Christ? And oh yeah, we did this thing last year when we went out and we did it's this idea that is what Christ was hoping for when he talked about reaching Judea, was every now and then we do this thing as a church. This idea that you can turn it on, it turns on and turn off. There's times that, well, we do it on this weekend, but next weekend I'm just going to do mind my own business. And I would say that's actually probably the more dangerous thing that sometimes these programs can teach us, is that you share your faith, you talk to people about the message of Christ, at some times that are appropriate and other times when, you can be off the clock and on the clock, so to speak. So I want to look at a passage today that I believe is actually one of the best passages to talk about parallels for us today in looking at how to witness to our Judea. It's John 4. If you have a Bible, you can turn there. You're familiar with the passage, woman of Samaria, woman at the well. But I want to argue with you before I even get into this that the Bible doesn't ever really teach us a formula for sharing the gospel, like a 4 spiritual laws or a evangelism explosion or a 2 ways to live or a way of the master. There's these formulas. What you'll find is that the way that the gospel is explained is almost always tailored to the people it's being explained to. The book of Romans, the reason why it's called the book of Romans is because it's the gospel letter written to people who live in Rome, who came from a Greek background. Then you have the book of Hebrews, which is a letter. And the reason it's called Hebrews is because it's written to people of Jewish descent, of Hebrew descent, and helps them understand the gospel in a way that they'll get. You'll see that this is kind of where this happens. Each of the epistles is written to a specific area and a specific group of people to help them understand and understand the gospel, and thus it was almost always custom tailored. And you'll see even in the book of Acts how the apostles themselves will change their stories and their methods as they reach different people. There's this idea that there was not a formula. Now, the passage I want to read to you, let me just read this, is in John chapter 4. I think you'll see we don't often think of it as a kind of an opportunity for Jesus to share the gospel with someone, but this is exactly what it is, and you'll see just how custom tailored it is. Let me read this to you. I'm going to start in verse 4. John chapter 4, verse 4, and it says, "He had passed through Samaria, so he came to a town of Samaria called Sychar, near the field that Jacob had given to his son Joseph. Jacob's well was there. So Jesus, wearied as he was from his journey, was sitting beside the well, and it was about the 6th hour. A woman from Samaria came to draw water, and Jesus said to her, 'Give me a drink.' For his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. The Samaritan woman said to him, 'How is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with Samaritans.' And Jesus answered, if you knew the gift of God and who it is saying to you, give me a drink, you would ask him, and he would have given you living water. And the woman said to him, sir, you have nothing to draw water with, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than our father Jacob? He gave us this well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock. And Jesus said to her, everyone who drinks of this water will be thirsty again. But whoever drinks of the water that I give him will never be thirsty again. The water that I will give him will become in him a spring of water welling up to eternal life. And the woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I may not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water. And Jesus said to her, go, call your husband and come here. And the woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, you are right in saying, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. What you have said is true. The woman said to him, sir, I perceive that you are a prophet, and our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. And Jesus said to her, woman, believe me, the hour is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for our salvation is from the Jews. But the hour is coming and now is here when true worshipers will worship in the Father in spirit and truth, for the Father is seeking such people to worship him. God is spirit, and those who worship him in spirit and truth. And the woman said to him, I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. And when he comes, he tells us all these things. And Jesus said to her, I who speak to you am he. When you look at that passage, I don't know what you see right away, but I see someone who was able to meet somebody exactly at their point of need and help them find truth when they weren't looking for it themselves. When you look at this, I want you to see a couple things in this passage that I think we can learn and apply to us today. And one of the very first things, and I know it's pretty obvious, but it's with one point we don't probably make very much, is that this whole encounter was unplanned. Obviously, in God's eyes, he's sovereign, he knows these things, but just in the scheme of life, this was not something that Jesus came to do, to have this conversation with this woman. You know, he and his disciples would go about and they would teach in different towns and they would travel. So they had a plan and they had an agenda. They would go and kind of do these teaching sessions before the crowds, but this is not one of them. They're headed to a different town, the Sychar, and he's tired, worn out from all the work, and so he says, I'm just going to sit here next to this well. You guys go in town to get some food, and I'm just going to sit here and rest. And while he's sitting there, up comes this woman to draw water from the well. And his first words are not, if you were to die tonight, do you know where you would be? Or, do you know that there are 4 spiritual laws, just like there are physical laws? You know what I mean? He doesn't open up with a spiel. His first words are, could you get me a drink of water, please? Now, I hope it came across, because he actually says, give me a drink, but I'm thinking there's some inflection in there, it's like, give me a drink, kind of like with shoulders up, but we'll see. But he asked for a drink of water. And it's just kind of, and then she kind of does this whole thing where she kind of says, how is it that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. So he asked for a drink, and then she brings up this issue of saying, hey, whoa, we're not supposed to be talking here. You're in your side. And so she brings up a conflict, and then the rest goes from there. Jesus takes that opportunity that she kind of brings up. I'm sure she could have not said a word, probably gave him a drink, handed it to him. I don't know how he would have made the bridge by then, but the reality is that he simply was tired and thirsty. The woman came to draw water. He asked for a drink, and the discussion begins. Now, I want you to notice that Jesus wasn't saying, you know what, I'm on a break. I just did a gig over here. We're headed to a new town. I'm about to do another gig. This is my time off. This is my relax get a drink of water time. Maybe have a meal. My disciples are kind of taking care of me. No, he sees an opportunity and he takes advantage of it. And I want you to hear this, is that I would say that reaching Judea, reaching our neighbors, reaching our friends, our coworkers, is way more about looking for opportunity than it is about having some sort of spiel whenever you run into them. When an opportunity arises, are you ready to actually engage and have the conversation? Or is it something you're saying, only when I'm ready am I going to approach you with this idea of, sharing with you the gospel? Opportunities, they come by and they present themselves. And what you find here is that Jesus said, okay, we're going to have this conversation. Let's do this. And he presents and he goes on. Now, some people, I know, are really good at creating opportunities. And I really appreciate that about them. They'll engage people and, in a very friendly, open way. They'll engage people and they'll kind of sit there and they'll kind of analyze, is there an opportunity here? And if there is, they'll keep going with it. And if not, they'll be done. But they're proactive about these opportunities. And you can be that. And actually, I love that. I know, like I said, some people are very gifted in that area, and they're neat to be around. There's nothing wrong with that, I should say. Some people are just better at it than others. But yet, I will say this, is every single one of us will be presented opportunities. Sometimes they land in your lap, and you have to ask yourself, what am I going to do with this? Someone opens up about a struggle they're having. Someone shares with you that they're worried or concerned, or that they're upset about the state of the world, or you name it. There's so many times when people will drop an opportunity in your lap to sit there and say, okay. You don't have to be one of these people who's really good at creating them to get them. They come. The question is when they do come, are you ready? Because here's the other hard truth about this idea of making sure that we are available when opportunity knocks, is that sometimes opportunities will only be presented to you. You may be the one person who that person has ever given an opportunity to share Christ with them has ever given. You know this as well as I do, that some people are just, they are closed off. They are brick walls when it comes to things about God or anything like that. And the reality is in our world is that sometimes even those kind of folks will have a moment or a little question in their head. Could I be wrong? What if there is something bigger out there? And if you're there at that moment, that might be the moment that God has opened up for someone to be able to break in. So there's not just a sense of, are you ready? But I want you to understand that opportunities, when they come, they are precious gifts. Never should we sit there and say to an opportunity, oh, there'll be another one later, I'm going to skip this one. Because reality is that oftentimes there is not. And I know I felt that time where an opportunity has come, and I have said, what, I'll do this later, I just don't feel like doing it right now. And then later when I feel like I'm ready, the opportunity isn't there anymore. And now it feels like I'm trying to force something that seemed natural last time. Are we ready when opportunities present themselves? Jesus was, and so either. So moving on, the second thing I want you to see is that Jesus, instead of letting her kind of push away, he forces the situation to find common ground with her. She brings up the issues of this kind of idea that, Jews and Samaritans and men and women, we're not supposed to be talking. He says, Samaritan woman said to him, how is that you, a Jew, ask for a drink from me, a woman of Samaria? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans. And the assumption was is that with these two divisions, that he being a man and she being a woman, he being a Jew and she being a Samaritan, that they have no common ground. There is no place where they can relate to one another. What she doesn't admit is that it's even more so than that. What she doesn't say is that she's also got a little shame going on in her, and the reason why she's at this well in the middle of the day instead of in the morning is because she doesn't have common ground with a lot of people because she's had so many relationships. So she doesn't think he knows that one yet. So Jesus' his response is basically, I'm thirsty. You're obviously thirsty. I'm talking about water and thirst here. Do you not thirst? I think you do thirst. You know what? If you actually knew who I was, you know that thirst that you have, I could fix that forever. And so he finds his way of because clearly she came to the well for a reason, right? She came to draw water. She needs water. And so he says, okay, you know what we're going to talk about? We're going to talk about water. Because I know that even though you don't think we have anything in common, we have water in common. Let's talk about that. And he begins his conversation with her in order to communicate more truth than that. And in a nutshell, he's basically saying, you know what? We do have similar needs. And guess what? We also have similar answers. Truth, my truth is also your truth. Because when she kind of goes to this point of realizing that Jesus is a little bit more than just some thirsty guy sitting by a well, realizing that he understands and knows things about her that he couldn't possibly know, she says, Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped on this mountain, but you say that in Jerusalem is the place where people ought to worship. And what you need to realize is that this is another attempt to divide. She's already said that we're not supposed to be talking because I'm a man, you're a woman, you're a Jew, I'm a Samaritan. But when she begins to realize that he's not disengaging from this conversation, she tries to put up another wall saying, okay, all right, I see that you're one of these religious, prophetic types, but you still have your place and I have my place, where I get this, your truth and your wisdom is Jerusalem and mine's over here. So thank you, but no thank you. It's basically like someone saying, I hear you, but I know Christians, I know that's your truth, but I have my truth. And my truth comes from whatever other worldview that I come from. Yours is yours, mine is mine. Thank you, I'll respect yours, but it doesn't belong to me. And then Jesus comes around and says to her, whoa, hold on. Don't you realize that there will be a day that's coming soon where people will realize there is no here or there. There's basically just truth. There's a spirit and there's truth. And my truth and my spirit is your truth and your spirit. He bridges that gap. Now, I say it in this way because I want you to hear this. You see this all the time today, where people all the time will speak more about their divisions, what divides them, than what unites them. People in our world, we are actually trying, it seems like we're actually physically trying to separate people more and more and more. And to say that you have your thing, they have their thing, do not mind your own business each in your own little corners. The world honestly claims that there are different truths out there today. This in our world where, and that is, obviously that's an oxymoron to say that there are different truths. Maybe if you're talking about, that 2 + 2 = 4 and 5 + 5 = 10, those are two different truths. But the idea that math is true is universal. And what they don't understand is that the idea of who God is, the truth, what we need, this living water that is available to all people, is a universal truth. It's not just a truth that Christians believe or works for Christians. It's a truth that everyone needs. And so Jesus decides to focus on what they have in common rather than their differences. My question is can we do the same thing? Are we in that same mentality where we, just like every other group, divides people up? And it says, well, that's theirs, and these are ours, and those are theirs. Or do we see everyone as having that common ground, that common need? Okay, moving on. The third thing you see in this passage I want you to see that kind of really relates to us today is this idea that Jesus seeks to spark curiosity in her. In John chapter 4, 10 to 12, he says, Jesus answered her, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that's saying to you, give me a drink, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. The woman said, sir, you have nothing to draw water for, and the well is deep. Where do you get that living water? Are you greater than the father Jacob, who gave us his well and drank from it himself, as did his sons and his livestock? So Jesus responds to her with this kind of idea of saying, giving her living water. And this is kind of a neat little parallel, because in her mind, this well, Jacob's well, which is a well-known well in the area, Jacob's well was a miracle. You know, it was dug by one of the founding fathers of the faith, and it still today is a place where we can draw water from. And here's this guy who says that he's got better water than this. I mean, this is historic water. This is amazing water that we all look for. And he's trying to say that his is better? Really? Explain to me this. That's what she's basically doing. In a very kind of almost sarcastic tone, she's saying, you're trying to tell me that you are better than our father Jacob, who dug this well? Really? Okay, I want to hear this. He got her a little bit by just challenging something, saying, I've got something better even what you think is great. And he gets her kind of going. Now, to prove that he's no fool while maintaining her curiosity, because she's kind of like, he switches to, okay, let's have this conversation. But first, go get your husband. Ooh. Because the woman answered him, I have no husband. And Jesus said to her, well, you're right. You have no husband. For you actually have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. And this is what you've said is true. And the woman at this point goes, oh, okay, all right. I can kind of see I'm out of my league here. But he definitely gets her attention, doesn't he? You know, he starts this whole conversation with thirsty, kind of gets her to go into this idea, oh, you really think that you have it better water than this? And he's like, oh yeah, let me explain to you. And he's like, oh, okay, you do seem to get things a little bit even more. So he uses this to kind of draw her in to listen to what he has to say. Because she's listening at this point. She knows that this guy is more than meets the eye. And at this point, what you realize is that she is now open to hearing whatever he had to say. When he first talked about the living water, and she gave the sarcastic remark about Jacob's well being, him being greater, she wasn't listening at that point. She was kind of arguing. And then he brings in the husband, and now she's like, oh, okay. All right. I'm going to pause, and I'm going to listen. Now, I say that because one of the most important things that we need to do in order to reach our Judea, people, our neighbors, our friends, is to actually want them to listen to what we have to say. I know that sounds super simple, but until they want to hear what you have to say, they won't hear what you have to say. And so oftentimes I struggle when people want to force something, make something happen, and the person, they want to finish the whole thing, but the person's checked out a long time ago. And they're just like, please go away, please go away, please go away. It's the same thing when the telemarketer's on the phone, and you're trying so politely to say, no, I'm not interested, but they keep going, right? Does it make you say, okay, you know what, you changed my mind. Now I want to talk with you. No, you're like, now you get upset. And you're like, please stop, and if you're the brave ones, you're like, click, or click now. Can't hang up the phone anymore like you used to. But you know what I'm saying? There's that sense, and it happens to everybody in every view, and it also happens when we're talking about Jesus. If someone doesn't want to hear it, you're not making it better by forcing it. One of the best things you can do is wait for them to want to listen to you. And this is one of the best tools that I have ever found in sharing my faith with other people, is to say, is this something that you even want to talk about right now? And then let them say yes or no. Because sometimes they'll be on the defense, and then I ask, and then they go, okay, sure. Tell me what it is. And they put their guard down for a little bit because you asked. You asked them if they're interested. You got them at least to want to listen to the rest of your words. That aspect of making sure that we wait till we have people's attention is another vital piece of what it means to take advantage of the opportunities that come our way. If we want to reach people, our neighbors, if we want to have more conversations with them and not have them try to, go inside when we walk by or avoid us when they see us, out and about, is to not try to be the person who is hounding them with information when they don't want to hear it. We wait for opportunities. We wait for their attention before we share it. And the fourth thing you see in this passage is that Jesus really addresses her real needs. She came to the fountain, or to the well, to draw water. He starts there. But what he finds is that she's actually there for more reasons than just water. I kind of hinted at it earlier, but I'll explain a little bit more now. The passage says that she came at about the 6th hour to draw water, which that's in verse 6, where at the end of it, he was sitting beside the well. It was about the 6th hour when the woman from Samaria came. Now, in this time was basically, not like ours. It's not 6 p.m., it's not 6 a.m. What they would do when the sun rose, they would start counting hours. Okay, and so usually the 6th hour was about noon. And that's why when Jesus was crucified, the hours were from when the sun rose until when the sun set. And so 6 hours about noon, which is not the time you typically come to draw water. Typically, in any of cultures that do this kind of thing, that some of them still exist, that's one of the first things you do in the morning. Get up, go get the water with your jugs, get it out of the way. Now, there's a reason why she's doing it at noon. It's because, and most likely, it's because she didn't want to be in the same place as everyone else in the morning. There's a good chance that with all the other women going to draw water in the morning, and if she were to go out there, she would have been that woman that all the other women probably looked down upon, because she didn't have a husband, but yet she had several men in her life. And I'm sure as societies can be, people were pretty ugly about that to her. And so her simple solution was to show up at noon. No one else is going to be there. Today, though, unfortunately, there's this guy sitting on the well. But she wanted her privacy. She wanted to avoid the crowd. And so what you find is that not only, this is kind of the neat thing, is so she's coming to get water, but Jesus realized that she's not only thirsty, but she's also feels shame and she's not accepted. And so he brings up this whole idea with the husbands. And I want to explain. See, I don't know if we see this parallel very often. He's saying, you know what? You come every day to have your needs met at this well. And every day you have to return, and it's never a permanent fix. You always get thirsty again. You know what? You do the same thing with men. You try one guy out for a little while, and eventually that one runs dry, and that one ends, and you're doing it again. You're looking for love and acceptance, but you're in that same cycle as with the water with these relationships with these guys. And so he makes this parallel with her, basically saying, I know what you really need. You want to no longer have to keep coming back because your needs keep coming up. This is Jesus John chapter 4:10. He said, Jesus answered, if you knew the gift of God and who it is that is saying you, give me a drink, you would have asked him and he would have given you living water. And then later on, she would say to him, the woman said to him, sir, give me this water so that I will not be thirsty or have to come here to draw water again. See, I want to end this cycle of my needs keep coming up. And he's like, oh, you know what? Thirst is not the only place where that need keeps coming up for you. The passage goes into details, but we know that he wins her over in this idea of, the passage doesn't go into detail of explaining to us what eventually clicked in her mind. But my guess is at the end of it, when she says, I know that the Messiah will come and tell us these things, and then Jesus said to her, hey, you know my last name is Christ? He didn't say that. But yeah, she says, I know the Christ will come. And he said, guess what? Guess who I am? I am he. I'm the one. Now, I want you to see this. She had been coming because she thirsted over and over again. She can't find a relationship that will last. And the only thing we are given to tell us that she is actually won over is that she becomes to realize that the Messiah, God's anointed one, took enough time to sit down with me at a well and invest in me and help me, offer me living water. This woman walks away changed after this point, and I think it was because she realized that there is a God who sees her, knows her needs, and desires to meet them. That she is not like her city, her town, they look down upon her or dismiss her. But yet the Messiah, the one that everyone's looking forward to, has revealed himself to her. I didn't read it earlier, but it goes on to say that in John 44:39, it says, many Samaritans from the town believed in him because of the woman's testimony, and she said, he told me all that I ever did. He knew me. He knew me. And so she walks away feeling filled up, now having this desire that men weren't able to give her, God did. He made her feel complete, valued, loved, whole, all of that. His motive truly was for her benefit. He wanted her to not he wanted her to get out of that cycle that she was in. He was truly offering her living water. Now, the reason I bring this up is because my final point in all of this is that motive does matter. Why we share God's good news with other people matters. If we're doing it because it's something that we do as a duty, some sort of program, and we're trying to, I'm knocking on that door right there because it's right next door. I'm going to knock on that one because it's next door to that, and I want to make sure that I've knocked on every door on our street. Or do I knock on that door because Jim lives there? I don't know if Jim lives there, but because I know the guy who lives there, and I want him to know about God's love for him. Motive matters. If someone will feel it if they're feeling like they are just a target or some sort of number or quota. People want to know that you care about them. And if you didn't hit the rest of the houses on the street and you spent the entire day with them, that wouldn't be fine because motive matters. Why are you here? You're here to share someone the truth that they need to hear, that they want to hear. You'll hear me say that many, many times, that motive matters. My honest desire is that even as a church and everything that we do it for the right motive. We don't do it to build a kingdom for ourselves. We don't do it to be self-righteous. We don't do it for, any number of reasons. We do it out of faithfulness and obedience to our God because he loves people and we do too. In a very divided world, I found that people don't argue points as much as today as they argue your motive. Have you noticed that? When people disagree with you, they don't typically disagree with you like the point you made. They disagree with your motive behind it. Well, that's because you are an elitist. Or that's because you are a racist. Or that's because you are, you know what I mean, or a communist. Or that's because you are, you know what I mean? They put a motive behind it because they don't want to listen to your points or hear your arguments. But if they can sit there and say your motives are wrong, well then they can discount everything you have to say. So that's why I sit there and say, make sure your motive is in the right place. So when someone accuses you of having the wrong motive, you can go, no. You even know what my motive is? Can I explain to you my motive of why I do this or say this or make this point or have this argument? And go to the place of motive. Explain to them, I don't do this for me. There's a little thing that I came up with. I'll put it up here. Go ahead and go to the next one. So this is like the license plate I want, or the shirt. Doug. Here we go. All right. See if we can get the shirt. It's this idea of this. My God is for you. And I do it like that because people would sit there and go, what? But I want people to know that my God is for you. He wants you to choose life. He's offering you all the benefits that he would ever offer me or anyone else. He loves you. He cares for you. He is for you. I want you to know that. Before anything else, I want you to know that. I think that's a part of the motive of what we're talking about, is to help people understand that I'm not trying to beat you. I'm not trying to win another tally on my checklist or my awards list. I genuinely care about you. That's my motive. And if my motive's in the right place, then you can typically find that you will find a more open audience. And so this is one of the hard things for us to understand. The gospel is not only truth about what Christ has accomplished and done. When we present to the gospel, well, the gospel is the truth. But evangelism, the idea of sharing the gospel, is truth and motive. You need both of those things to do it effectively. A right motive, just real quick, a right motive discourages legalism. If you have a right motive, you're not so caught up in the do's and don'ts. According to a legalist, this conversation that Jesus is having with this woman was way out of bounds. Way out of bounds. Especially if they knew her background. He should not have been having this conversation, but his motive was right, and so we see it is one of the stories in Scripture that we learn from. Even the disciples, when they came back, saw that, and they wrestled with it. And when the disciples came back in verse 27, it says they marveled that he was talking with a woman. But listen to it. But no one said, what do you seek, or what are you talking, or why are you talking with her? No one asked, what was your motive? They were just caught up in the legalistic version of it. And I'll make this, the point is where you are and who you spend time with doesn't matter if your motive is in the right place. Now, your motive may not be in the right place, and then it matters a little bit, but if your motive's in the right place, I don't care where I see you or who I see you with. If your motive's in the right place, I trust that all good. A right motive causes us to see people. Too often we see causes, agendas, behaviors rather than people. Nobody wants to be a target. They want to be seen for who they are. And a right motive helps us to see people for who they are. A right motive also helps people to see us kind of in the same back way, and rather than seeing us as some sort of sleazy salesperson or kind of, whatever it might be, as they see our motive, they see us and they don't just see who we are or who we represent. A right motive also drives us to learn, because if we really desire to reach people that we know and our neighbors, then we will learn. How do we better communicate the gospel to people? How do we bridge connections so that people can hear us? How do we take advantage of opportunities? We'll learn. There's lots of great resources out there that we can learn from. I mean, even all those programs I talked about at the beginning, you can learn them, kind of keep them so when you're talking with somebody, you say, oh, this would be a great time to talk to them about this question, or this is presented. We become hopefully better equipped to be able to respond to opportunities when they come. I remember once hearing a story, but this is how much motive matters. Let me put it this way. I remember once hearing a story of a friend of mine who, he was one of these guys who shared his faith with one of the football players at a college. I'm trying to remember the college. I would say UT but it wasn't UT. He was sharing his faith with one of the like a lineman from from the football team, and he walked them through the Romans Road. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Romans Road. It's another one of these where you can help someone understand by reading through the book of Romans, where they can see the gospel for themselves. So either way, he explained it all to him, and this player got so excited, he came to faith, and he was like he just wanted to share the gospel with everybody he knew. And so what he did is he did the exact same, the only thing he knew. He did what his friend had done, or my friend had done. And he said he had a Bible, and he put it on the table, and they walked through it. Except for this football player didn't have a Bible. And so he goes home, and he knows his family has a Bible somewhere, and he pulls out one of these gigantic family Bibles. You remember these things? I mean, they're no joke, that big. And he takes that, and he sits, he invites some of his football player friends to the table with him, and then boom, puts this gigantic family Bible on the table, opens it up, and walks them through the Romans Road with this giant Bible. And it was comedic, to kind of to see. I don't know what his friends were thinking, but the effect was it didn't matter. His motive was right, and people were able to see past the fact that he didn't have a normal Bible. He only had this giant one, and how funny that looked. Because they knew his heart, and they knew, and that so often we forget. Just having the right heart is really all you need. There's a passage that says love covers a multitude of sins, and I think that's very true when it comes to even, love genuinely covers over a really choppy, horrible presentation of how much Jesus loves somebody. If you love them, and you butcher your way through it, the promise that the fact that you love them and were willing to do it is far, far better than having a very polished gospel explanation while not really loving that person. That's why I bet if you were to sit there and say, who led you to Christ? It wasn't some pro. It was someone who loved you very much, and you knew loved you very much. I have a ton of resources in this area if anyone has desire for this is an area that I really pray that we would grow in. That as a church that we would have a perspective of having that motive to love people that are around us so much that we would be willing to look for opportunities, find common ground, explore and try to pique their curiosity, and eventually be there to meet their real needs with the truth of God's word. If we do that, then I feel like we as a church will have no problem showing people who we really are and what we're about. Let's pray. Lord Father, thank you so much for our church, your word. I want to thank you, Lord, that you've shown us not just, but you've shown us practically with a story like the woman at the well, how much motive matters, how much it means just to be ready. Or whatever tools you use or give us or opportunities come our way, I pray that we as a church would do it for the right reasons. That, Lord, you'd help us to be people who are always ready, in season or out of season, to be able to make an argument for why we believe, to be winsome and loving towards people who we live with. Thank you for Huntington Beach, Lord. I pray that this city would be blessed by Beach Bible's presence in it. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.